What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the CelticsPod. I'm your boy Adam Taylor. Today I'm joined by my home dog, Mr. Greg Manakis. Greg, man, how was Christmas? How was you took a break away from like life just to go and just chill out for a week or two? How's that been?
It's been cool, man. It's been really cool. I got a lot of time in the studio with my band. I was back in Boston, so everyone listening, y'all know that I live down here in Austin, Texas. I've been here since 2012, but I grew up in Dorchester, so every Christmas I got to go home back and see the fam. This Christmas obviously was a little bit weird with COVID, so I had to test right before I left. I was like, isolating before I left, and I got there. We didn't really see too many people. I didn't even hit up any of my homies because I was just trying to see my family, right? So that was kind of weird. But I'm back here in Austin, Texas now. But you know what's crazy, bro, is my cousin, whose name is Steve Moy, is on this show on Lifetime called Married at First Sight. And I don't know if you know the show. Do you know the
Yeah, I
concept of
know
the
the
show?
show. I know the show.
Okay. So my cousin's on the new season that just filmed in Boston. So last night was the matchmaking episode. So I was there when he found out that he was going to be getting married in 2 weeks, right? So he hit me up over the summertime and he was like, "Hey man, come through. Like they want to film me playing basketball with some of my friends. So come through, just be ready to hoop. They're just going to be shooting some B-roll." And when we were playing ball, like Dr. Viviana Cole shows up and she's like, "Hey Steve, like you're gonna get married in 2 weeks." And like I was there for that episode and that filming. So last night I got to see myself on TV, which was really cool because in that game, me and my cousin Steve ran this like perfect pick and roll, and I threw this little lob pass over the top for him for a layup, and that made the cut. So I was on TV last night, man. I never got on TV before playing basketball until last night. So I'm really, really proud of myself.
And now you're watching it thinking, yo, I look smooth, man. I reckon I could at least get a 10-day hardship deal.
Right.
Yeah, I'm telling you, dude.
I'm in pretty good shape right now, though. As we talked about a few weeks ago, I've been hitting the gym. I'm 6 feet, 190 pounds right now. I'm feeling pretty strong. The jumper's looking smooth. I feel like I could stand in the corner and I could probably hit, at least one 3-pointer, unlike the Celtics.
So for Christmas, I bought myself these like fancy scales, right? Like the ones that you stand on, it tells you like how much water you're carrying for the day, what your bait, like it tells you everything. It just uploads it to an app. They're nice.
Just
They're
through
on
your
like
feet.
well, it does like a body scan, so like it like does
Interesting.
some. It's weird. You have to be on there for like 4 minutes for it to read everything. But I'm
Okay.
like, yeah, cool, because I just watched a video on my phone, right? And like, so when COVID first hit, I was 194, and I'm like, yo, that's a decent walking around weight.
Mhm.
Now, after 2 years of being isolated, really not really doing much because obviously I was protecting my grandma, God rest her soul,
Mhm.
and everything there. Like, yeah, I'm at 266, bro. I'm like, yo, that's a lot of
Dang.
weight. I'm like, dang, dude. So I need to
266.
266. I'm like, yeah, I mean, I'm a
Oh.
big guy anyway, so like I can carry it, but I'm like you can see it a little bit too, like that spare tire starting to be there. I'm like, yeah,
Mhm.
I need to get back to the gym. I ain't got no one to really have to protect right now. I'm fully vaxxed, so I'm going back this week. I'm just like, yeah, I need to drop some of this 266 back down towards that 190 area. And then the other thing I find funny is when you say I'm from Dorchester. So do you know how many people from Boston I speak to now? Like I got my boy Tim that I do stuff with over on YouTube. He's from Lowell. I got you.
Lol, yeah.
I got you. I got Will. I got a couple of other people that I speak to on the phone. Everybody on the show, if you're a long time listener, you know Cody. Not one of you have the Boston accent, right? Now it's not like Dorchester. And I'm
Well,
like,
okay, all right. So I've been here in Austin, Texas since 2012. When I first moved here, literally, so I'm a teacher, right? That's what I do. I teach English. A lot of times I'm working with students that are learning how to speak English as a second language. I'm the ESL teacher at the school that I work at. So when I first moved here, none of my kids could understand me because of my accent. So I had to work really, really hard to start enunciating and speaking quote unquote appropriately without the Boston accent, to the point where like I kind of have just like a neutral speaking voice now. But Adam, when we eventually see each other, when we eventually go to a Boston Celtics game together, we're going to be having some beers, maybe drink some whiskey beforehand. And I swear to you, my guy, you will hear it. You will hear it because it comes out. It comes out when I get really emotional about something, or if I get really drunk. So that's when you'll hear it.
Dorchester. I'm from Dorchester. Got stealthy. I'm like, yeah, let's do it, man. I can't wait. I need to get myself to Boston a few times this year, but I want to drop some of this 266 before I let people start seeing me
No, that's
around.
fair. That's
They'll
fair.
be like, "Yo, this dude is huge." I'm like, I ain't about that life, Anyway, what we're talking about huge. There's one thing that was huge in Celtics land yesterday or Wednesday if you're listening to the show. Well, you will be listening on Friday at least. And that was the amount of threes that was missed. It was a huge letdown. It was, I think Keith Smith put it out in a tweet when he put his 10 takeaways out, and he was like, they couldn't hit the water if they fell out of a boat. And I found that quite funny because I'm like, yeah, that's exactly how it is. They would have fell out and found land before they found water. How are you feeling, man? After seeing, I know there's been some disappointing losses the last week or so, but this one was just like, are you kidding me, man? Like, so many threes, bro. 42 threes, and you hit 4 of them. Like,
Yeah,
that's
and
a lot.
I want to touch on what you said in your article for Celtics blog that you wrote a little bit later. But just in terms of like my general feel watching that game, like obviously there were a few things that I think the Celtics could have done better aside from shooting the ball. But one thing that everyone's been harping on this year is the effort, and I felt like they played really, really hard. Right throughout the game, I don't think you can really question their effort. So at least we can say that the Celtics played hard. Right. But effort does not win games. What wins games is effort plus execution. Right. And we did not have the execution specifically with the 3-point shot. And it reminded me of that game. And this was a regular season game, right? Stakes were high because it dropped us to 3-game losing streak, 3 games under 500. Just a regular season game, though. But it reminded me of the Houston Rockets against the Golden State Warriors game 7 in like 2018, where they missed 27 3-pointers in a row and just kept chucking up the 3 because eventually the math is going to tell us that one of those 3-pointers is going to go in. And it just didn't happen, right? It was just one of those games where, for whatever reason, the Celtics far underperformed their expected field goal percentage for the open shots that they got, right? Chris Forsberg tweeted out the tracking data for last night, right? And the 3-point shots by defender distance, we are 0 for 1, defended very tightly, 0 for 5, defended tightly, 0 for 12 for open 3-pointers. That's 4 to 6 feet. And then 4 for 24 on wide open 3-pointers. So at least we hit 4 of the wide open shots.
I mean, yeah, but that's not enough, man.
Nah,
Like, and I get
enough.
it. I get it. Sometimes, it's just not there. I'm not saying that. I get there's a take out there, and there's definitely an avenue where you can look at these things and be like, do you know what? Obviously, this is because the Celtics lack elite level shooters. And the fact that this isn't the first game where it's been a bad shooting performance kind of alludes to that fact. I'll give you that, but none of them bad performances have been this bad. I didn't, but and I get it. Some of your best shooters aren't on the floor, i.e., Jason Tatum. But at the same time, you have enough talent around you that 4 for 42 isn't really, and the defense that the Clippers were putting up against you wasn't exactly like in your face physical. You're going to feel these contests on every shot. We're talking wide open. That means there's no one
24,
there.
24 wide open threes.
And they're just not landing. And I feel like for me, it's like, at some point, I understand the math says that things are going to level out, but guess what? What the math means is it will level out over the season. Right now, you need to change what you're doing because it's not working. And one of the biggest issues that everybody had during the last few months of Brad Stevens' tenure was the fact that the Celtics relied too much on shooting threes to get back into games. This felt like a winnable game, but they relied on threes to win it, where there was other avenues that they could attack to win the contest. You get what I'm saying? So I'm like, yo, you didn't need to shoot that many threes because you were getting whatever you wanted when you were running actions on like the side pick and roll to get slashes to the rim, or when you was attacking closeouts, you were getting whatever you wanted, and you were getting it from 3-2, but they just weren't falling. So why stick with it? The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result, man.
Yeah, and when you look at how many wide open threes we got, like part of it is because I think there were a lot of possessions in which we did move the ball well. We made the extra pass and we drove to get a kick out, right? We didn't drive to score. We drove for paint touches and then to kick the ball out. But so many of those 3-pointers were them just like daring us to shoot. They're like, we don't even have to run at you, specifically Al Horford. There were like maybe 3 wide open threes that Al had where they stayed with the one pass away, right? They didn't even run at Al. They were just like, go ahead, bro. Like, you're 0 for 5 tonight. There's no way you're hitting this one. This isn't your night. If you hit it, like, props to you, you know? So, like, announcers will say this, coaches will say this. If you're open, you have to ask yourself why you're so open, right? Am I open for a reason? Because nobody thinks I'm going to hit the shot, right? And I think that's kind of where the Celtics ended up being last night. Yeah, there definitely were some good offensive possessions that led to open threes, but I would venture to guess, I don't have the numbers in front of me, I didn't actually look at this, but I would guess at least 7 to 8 of those wide open threes were them just being like, okay, we're good with you shooting that shot.
Yeah, we can live with this.
Mm-hmm.
And like after the game in the post-game presses for the Clippers, right? Terrence Mann was like, oh wow, they did miss. Oh wow. You know, like kind of just like shocked at looking at the stat line himself.
Yeah.
And I feel like they definitely dared the Celtics to shoot. And that tells me that teams feel very comfortable with letting Boston do most of their work beyond the 3-point line. Because it's just not where their talent is best laid at the moment. And I wrote this in my piece. I was like, look, man, the Celtics have some valuable, very talented shooters, but what they have an abundance of is explosive rim finishers. So why are you settling for threes when you have guys on the floor that can really damage you in that fight, like 6 to 2 foot around the rim region, just being able to explode? You saw Rob Williams getting his work done on putbacks and on like he commanded the offensive glass, commanded the defensive glass. He was doing what he does best. He was exploding around the rim. At the moment, I feel like Jaylen Brown's kind of got away from that a little bit, where realistically, that's Jaylen Brown's bread and butter. I understand this has improved dramatically as a pull-up shooter and a catch-and-shoot guy, but his best asset, in my opinion, is still that athletic explosion, you know, where he really drives and just explodes around the ring to get a good finish. Same as Romeo. We're not seeing it from Romeo and whoever else you want to throw in there. I think even Horford showed his value of, you know, throwing up the fake and then really attacking the closeout. I just felt like there was an overcommitment to the cause. And like sometimes, like, you know, when you're joking with your boys and you overcommit to a bit and everyone just stops laughing because you've just took it one step too far and it's not funny anymore. And only you're the one still laughing. It felt like that for quite a large stretch.
Yeah, and like I'm looking at Jaylen Brown's shot chart right now. And like if you look at him, man, he does have a ton of shots in the paint, right? He only took 2 shots outside the paint that was not a 3-pointer, pretty much. And he made both of those shots, right? There are a couple shots like right around the edge of the paint, but he did have a lot of shots in the paint. It's just he took so many shots. He took 36 shots last night, right? So he took 13 threes. So that means he has 23 shots that were not 3-pointers, and it looks like around, I don't know, I'd looking at the shot chart, I'd say at least 12 of those are like directly in the paint. So like I hear what you're saying. I just think the JB thing, when nobody else is hitting shots, right? You have to do everything in a game where Jason Tatum isn't playing and nobody else is able to score the basket, right? So I think with JB, I didn't hate the way he played. I thought he shot poorly, but he was the one guy that was really able to get to the paint and finish. And one thing I'm going to push back on a little bit is Zubac is a problem, man. Like, he's huge. So when he's in the game, the Celtics really weren't able to drive at him unless Al Horford was out by the 3-point line, right? And then that's when Rob Williams was able to do damage when Marcus Morris was guarding him. That's why he had 10 offensive rebounds. The Celtics offensive rebounds numbers, dude, like looking at the numbers in this game, it's ridiculous that we lost because we had 8 steals. I'm going on a little tangent here, but we had 8 steals and 8 blocks, which was about twice as many as the Clips. We out-rebounded them 21-9 on offensive rebounds. We only had 8 turnovers. We forced 14 turnovers. So, like, the only reason we lost the game really was because of shooting, and we were 4 for 42, whatever it was. So, circling back real quick, though, with all the quote-unquote, like, explosive rim finishers, like, who do you really see as explosive rim finishers? Because I see Jaylen Brown as a guy that definitely can do it. Josh Richardson, I think, can do it. Jason Tatum, I wouldn't really describe him as like explosive. He's smooth. Robert Williams, I would say is explosive, but other than that, I don't really see too many
So I've
guys
got
that
Romeo
are
as
explosive
explosive. I've got
for
Neesmith
sure.
that's explosive. Like, you know, if
But
he
he
gets
can't
around
get
the
to the
rim.
paint. Yeah.
Yeah, like this is the problem. And then like the other thing is as well, like, and like, this was kind of the premise of the entire piece I wrote earlier today. If you've got Zubac in drop and then you're putting like you're really getting defended up on the perimeter, attack the mid range, man. Like
Yeah.
Jaylen Brown is a 30. What is he? A third? What is it? 37. A 37% mid range shooter this season. He's
Which is
hitting
far
his.
below his career average.
Yeah,
His
it
career average
is.
is way higher than that.
Yeah, it's like 40% is his career average. It's not like it's like a couple of percentage up, but then like he's not the only guy that's going to hit middies. Josh Richardson is built as a mid-range guy. Do you know what I mean? I feel like
Yeah.
Romeo could get there if he drove into the mid-range and let floaters go. Pritchard, I think, would have a field day stepping in from the free and pulling up in space. Like you've got guys that can shoot from that mid-range area, attack where the space is. If you're not scoring from free, run some Iverson actions where you know come off the Iverson screens and turn and then attack, and then if the defense closes out on you, you've got the over the top pass to Rob Williams or a cutting Al Horford that you can dump off to. Give what take what the defense is giving you, and that defense and any drop defense like that, you know, it's the same against Philly when they run Embiid. It's the same against Denver when they run Jokic. So many teams are that kind of caught up in the analytics movement of you defend threes in the rim and you let those mid-range shots live. That's cool, but Boston, if you don't want to say they're built with rim like explosive rim finishers, what they are built with is a bunch of guys that can live in that mid-range area. Now, I'm not saying you need to do that on a game by game basis. What I am saying is if the three's not falling and you've got a big man that's really deterring you get into the rim consistently, live in that mid-range area, run plays to get you there, run rip, like, you know, run some UCLA screens, run your Iverson screens, do whatever you need to do to open a shooting pocket in an area where some of your guys are cash money. There was a great article on the Ringer, probably about 5 weeks ago at this point. Kevin O'Connor tweeted it out, but he didn't write it. And it was about how the mid-range game hasn't died, but teams have become far more selective with guys they feed in that area. They want
That's a
good
great article.
You know what I mean? Like DeMar DeRozan's one of those guys. Tatum is one of those guys. But my argument there is we're in a season where those guys are in and out of lineups because of health and safety protocols. So to hell with analytics for a few months. Run what suits your roster best on a game by game basis. And this game, after the second quarter, maybe halfway through the third, when you've got a large enough sample size that you're like, the threes aren't falling tonight. We can see that. We're 2.5 quarters through the game. We've hit 1-3. Let's just try this to get and then build a lead. And if you want to go back to shooting threes once you've got a comfortable lead, do so. But at least run more around that mid-range area where the space is. It perplexes me because a spreadsheet tells you that it's not an analytically favored shot. I get it, but I just disagree when your team isn't at full strength.
Yeah, and also just like the guys that hit the shots, right? So Jaylen hit one, Grant hit two, and Sam Hauser hit one, right? But if you look at like aside from Jaylen, who was 1 for 13, Grant only took 3 3-pointers. Hauser took 3 3-pointers, right? So like, why didn't we get them more opportunities to shoot? Whereas we have Al Horford's 0 for 7, right? Peyton Pritchard was 0 for 5, just didn't have the legs. Josh Richardson 0 for 5. So like even the guys that like hit their 3-pointers, it's not like we continued to look for those guys, you know? It's just like we kept going to the guys that weren't hitting shots and clearly didn't have a rhythm. And it's not like we were missing shots by a mile, you know, where there were a lot of them that rimmed out. But on those nights, like you're saying, man, you have to be able to have more in the bag. And this is something that I've been hearing a lot on like the national podcasts, like the Zach Lowe pod and the Mismatch pod. It's just talking about teams that are able to switch up whatever it is they do on a game-to-game basis. Like the Utah Jazz have been a hot topic of conversation in their willingness to play mismatch basketball this year and just like break their system from game to game. And it just seems like the Celtics, they're just they just don't have the pieces, man. Like like who on the team yesterday would you have felt really comfortable with doing anything other than Jaylen Brown? Like Josh Richardson just came back from COVID. Peyton Pritchard just didn't have it. He was awful. like Broderick Thomas was probably like our second best initiator of the offense in the 14 minutes that he played. And what does that tell you about the team, man? Like Broderick Thomas looks good. Do you want to look good? Do you want to talk about him in a minute?
Yeah, I liked Broderick Thomas. I thought, like, yo, he actually made things happen. He moved without the ball. He was cutting without the ball. And this is the problem for me. I think that a lot of these guys are talented, but part of me feels like, and I put this in the article too, and the word I used was castrated. I feel like Udoka is castrating some of this team's talent by asking them to play very, very specific roles. And if you kind of step outside of that role, he's going to pull you up, put you on the bench, and be like, "Yo, you need to play your role, son." And like, I feel like Thomas kind of fell victim to that after his first stint in the game. So we'll get to that. But yeah, I mean, I get what you're saying, man. I get that. Like outside of Jaylen Brown, where do you really feel comfortable of your initiation coming from? Where do you? And I mean, Jaylen Brown was awful. He had a potential 8 assists in 40 minutes, which isn't good at all. He made like none of them converted, but obviously you can't blame that on him because shots weren't falling across the board. But what I'm learning is Jaylen Brown is not an initiator, and that's fine. It's completely fine. We don't have to go down that road. It's just maybe it's what a lot of people hoped he would become, and at the moment we're not there yet. So without Jason Tatum, without Marcus Smart, why are we not utilizing Al Horford's passing above the break more and saying to Horford, like, yo, you initiate 90% of what we're going to do? Rob Williams is fantastic as a passer. Why are we not feeding? Why are we not working more off the block and initiating offense from the mid post? We've seen Marcus Smart do that. If you're comfortable running offense from Marcus Smart on the mid post, you best damn be sure that you can run it with Al Horford and Robert Williams. But we don't, and I just feel like the way Udoka's asking these guys to play and the positions he's putting them in and asking them to create from or to score from isn't conducive to what a lot of these guys' skill sets give you. And I just feel like there's a very big lack of self-awareness throughout the roster. I just think like, some guys are taking threes when they're not really 3-point shooters. Udoka's asking guys to do things that doesn't fit within their skill set or is maybe a little bit too far out their comfort zone to get consistency from them in a specific role. I don't know if you feel the same, but that's kind of like where everyone's like, oh, the Celtics didn't really have anyone that could do anything. I'm like, they had guys that could do a lot, but not with the way they were approaching the game.
Yeah, and I think this is one thing where like every game that we play other teams, you see how much other guys, just like random dudes on teams, have so much more freedom to create. And like even last night, there were some guys on the Clippers that like I really didn't know much about that ran a good pick and roll. Like Amir Coffee had a couple nice plays where he created something for himself. Johnson had a couple nice plays where he made one-on-one moves on people, spins to the baseline and things of that nature. You just like don't really see the guys outside of the like Jaylen Browns, Jason Tatum, Marcus Smart, Dennis Schroeder, Josh Richardson. You don't really see anybody else being allowed to do anything or like seeming. It almost seems like they don't have it in their bag to do it. But I'm like, they have to. At some point, they have to like show that they can do these things. Like Aaron Nesmith, we've seen him be a 3-level scorer. Romeo Langford, I think that his drives off of the corner and his little floater game, as you alluded to earlier, I think those are definitely there for him. It's just like we don't see that very often throughout the game. Nesmith, although he didn't play last night and hasn't played much this season, is the one guy where I really feel like we have underutilized what he could be for this team. He hasn't played great this year, but we've seen flashes of him being a 3-level scorer. And how many times have you seen that this year? Like maybe you could probably count on both hands, right?
Yeah,
so,
I mean,
go ahead.
No, carry on. No, carry on.
Well, I was just gonna say that to your point about Ime, when people say like, "Oh, he's not a bad coach. You can't blame it on him. You have to blame it on the players." It's like, good coaches, yeah, everybody can have a system. Brad Stevens had a system, and the players just didn't buy into that system, right? And everyone was calling Brad a bad coach last year. So by the same logic, you're gonna have to call Ime a bad coach this year because the system that he wants, the philosophy that he's trying to instill on the offensive end, the guys aren't doing it. So Aaron Nesmith is one of those guys where you got to empower somebody like that to become a weapon for you. Because as you said, that's a very strong word, but the word castrating him, it's what he's done to his offensive game this year. Because Nesmith looks like a shell of himself compared to what he was last year.
Yeah, exactly. Same with Romeo. Like Romeo looks better defensively, but at the same time, like this is a guy that came into the league where everyone was like, yo, he's an offensive guy. He's a slasher. He's going to be super aggressive getting to the rim. That's what he does. I feel like he's not allowed to do that. That's how I feel. Like he's being told, like, yo, you only drive to the rim when that's the last option. Any other time you need to feed it feels like schoolyard ball where it's like, yo, you feed Jaylen Brown or Jason Tatum. Now our bass guys feed them, feed them, feed them. Whereas if you go and look at like the Phoenix Suns, the Golden State Warriors, yes, I understand the offense is still geared towards getting Devin Booker or Steph Curry a good shot. But what it isn't you only feed this guy. It's very more egalitarian. And I feel like when Brad Stevens tried that, he lent into it a little bit too much when it was like the Brown, Tatum, Hayward era. And he lent a little bit too far towards the egalitarian. But Ime is very much like, yo, you feed the star and that's it. Your role is to stand in the corner and give us spacing. Well, that's fine in a normal year, but in a year like this where you really need guys to feel like they can attack the rim and they can be who they are as a basketball player, it's not working right now. Romeo looks a shell of himself, and all of a sudden, like on defense as well, it looks like his confidence is starting to take a hit. Pritchard's just letting him fly from anywhere because he's like, yo, I'm getting minutes. I need to put up some numbers so I can keep these minutes. You know what I mean? And it's just I blame Udoka a lot for the way, like, not the regression, but the stagnation of a lot of these players. And then obviously with guys like Neesmith, it's definitely a regression. And I know castrate's a strong word, but I definitely feel like that's what he's done to 50 or 60% of this roster at this point.
Yeah. But I think we should move on from Ime. We've talked about him enough, right?
You want to do Broderick Thomas?
Yeah, let's talk about Broderick Thomas just a little bit. Let's give him 2 minutes. Let's give him 2 minutes. I don't know if he's going to get another 2 minutes on the pod this year.
I think he was good, man. I think he was active. He was moving off ball real well. He was connecting plays real well. You know, whether that be with the ball in his hand or just relocating to allow space to open up for somebody who was on ball. Yeah, very good. He was a heady player in that game. Everything he did was well thought. I never watched him move and was like, yo, you're kind of encroaching on the spacing, or you've killed this driving lane for a guy. Everything felt like it was to generate that next step. You know what I mean? Like if he stood where he was, it was because he didn't want to sink into some driving lanes or whatever. I mean, don't get me wrong. I don't think he's an NBA level player right now. Like if the league was at full health all the way through, you wouldn't have seen Broderick Thomas last night. But I think that there's definitely a platform for him to build, and he's like a high IQ in terms of off-ball IQ for him to find a role in the NBA in a year or two. I think his shot looks quite nice as well. I know he missed a few, but that buzzer beater was a heartbreaker for him, man. Yeah, I felt so bad for him.
Alternative world, that shot counts. The Celtics go 14 for 42 from three. Once you take that shot off the board, it just kills all the momentum.
I mean, there is a world where that would happen, you know, because all of a sudden you've hit that big time free, like the one to close out, and you're just like, man, yeah, we can do this. Like, you know, threes are falling again, and it changes the mentality, right? But then it was like, now we ain't letting you get hot like that. You think we're letting Broderick Thomas get a shot like that? Like, you must be crazy.
No, but I didn't mind it. I didn't mind him on the court. He actually kind of reminded me a little bit of like when Romeo's playing really well, just the way he moves on the court and his ability to cut. It crossed my mind, like in that one game, how much of a difference was there between Broderick Thomas's minutes and Romeo Langford's minutes? Like
minimal.
Yeah, it really wasn't, right?
I feel Romeo's regressed over the last 3 or 4 games defensively, and I feel like his offense just, there's a lack of commitment to whatever he's being asked to do offensively, if he's being asked to do anything. So I'd agree there. I feel like Broderick Thomas was an equal value player to Romeo in that game.
Yeah, and I was impressed with his ability to move his feet on defense, too. There are a couple times where people tried to just drive by him, like, oh, there's this G League guy in front of me. I'm just going to go to the rack. And he moved his feet. He was strong with his body. So I wouldn't mind seeing him get another stint in the next game. Hopefully the Celtics have guys return from COVID protocols, and hopefully Marcus Smart's hand is good. Has there been a report about how he cut his hand?
Not that I've seen, just a laceration.
Okay, so it wasn't him punching another mirror in his hotel room.
No, I think we would have heard if he'd been hitting stuff. Like, I think that would have been hit. That we would have heard that. But like, does Marcus Smart make a difference in that game? I think Marcus Smart. Yeah, I think Marcus Smart makes a big difference. Not as a scorer. Like if you're relying on Marcus Smart to hit threes, you know you've hit a different type of low. But at the same time, as a playmaker, he's still the team's best passer. I don't think we can argue that at this point. Still the team's best playmaker, and he's another guy that's really going to get into your face when he's driving the lane. He will be the guy to pressure Zubac around the rim and then kick out. So I think that Marcus Smart was a big miss in this game. I feel like when I'm watching the Celtics after games and they're in press conferences, there's a lot of we're not healthy, but they're not realizing that teams they're facing aren't healthy either. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, we're talking about a Clippers team that didn't have PG. We know they didn't have Kawhi. That was obvious coming into the game, regardless of COVID. But you know, every team's unhealthy. But Broderick Thomas, man, yeah, I was impressed. I wasn't like, I'm not going to be screaming for him to get more minutes, but like, I'm definitely like, yo, if I see him again against Phoenix, I'm not going to be upset. Like, what? You're playing Phoenix and the form that you're in. Give all the young guys chances, man. That's the best opportunity they're going to get.
Right. Yeah. We should talk about what's been going on, though. Conversations. Jeff Clark, CelticsPod, wrote a piece today about a potential Jaylen Brown for Ben Simmons deal. You know, this is something that people have been throwing out there for quite some time now. That potentially the Celtics will need to move on from Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. And it's almost like getting to the point where it feels inevitable because it's like so in the zeitgeist of the NBA conversations right now. Like Zach Lowe just had Jeff Van Gundy on, and they had a discussion about that. Kevin O'Connor had your guy, Half Court Hoops. What's his name again? Piper
Gibson.
Piper Gibson, yeah, he was
Gibson
on
Gibson Piper,
yeah, he was on Kevin O'Connor's Mismatch Void podcast, and it seems like everybody is starting to talk about it, and it's gaining momentum to the point where it almost feels inevitable. It might not happen this year, but I'm starting to get that feeling like, this is going to happen one day. I'm going to wake up and I'm going to see that Jaylen Brown has been traded, and I don't want that to happen because I do think that there's a world in which these two guys can be DeMar DeRozan and Zach LaVine, right? There's no reason why they can't be those two guys. I think DeRozan is unbelievable this year. I've been watching a lot of the Bulls, and he's on a whole nother level that I never thought he'd be able to get to. So, like, this year, I don't think Tatum or Brown is on DeMar DeRozan's level. Zach LaVine, I think, has also surpassed Jaylen Brown this year. That was a guy that I think a lot of people thought Jaylen Brown was far better than him in the past, and I think you can't even make that argument anymore. I think Zach LaVine's a better player at this point. So with Jaylen and Tatum, I think that they can be what the Bulls have. We just have to have the right pieces around. But before we talk about moves we can make on the fringes, I just want to get your thoughts on the idea that Jeff Clark put out there and that Zach Lowe and Jeff Van Gundy talked about is a Jaylen Brown for Ben Simmons deal in which the Celtics would be getting one or two other pieces to go along with that.
Yeah, shout out Jeff, man. Jeff's the blog father. Anything
Yes,
Jeff puts out's always a good read. Yeah, I tweeted this earlier today. I'm actually at the point now where I kind of lean into a Jaylen Brown for Ben Simmons trade, but for me, there has to be more coming back, right? So I was watching the Garden Report yesterday on Wednesday, where it was like Jeff Goodman, Bob Ryan, and I think it was like Gary Tanguy. But like Goodman said, like, yo, if you can do Jaylen Brown for Ben Simmons plus Steph Curry, like, you do that deal. Like, that deal makes you better as a team. And I sat there and I was like, does Ben Simmons over Jaylen Brown plus obviously Steph Curry's shooting make you a better team? And the more I think about it, the more I think that a Ben Simmons Jason Tatum partnership is more beneficial. It suits the team more than what a Jaylen Brown Jason Tatum partnership does. And I don't know whether that's just because it's a partnership we haven't seen, but in my head, I'm like, Jason Tatum is never going to have been given the looks that Ben Simmons could create for him. You know what I mean? Where Ben Simmons drives, really sucks in that defense because of his ability to finish around the rim and then just kicks out to Tatum. Like, Tatum's never going to have found open looks the way he would if Ben Simmons was creating for him. I also don't think Tatum would have played with a playmaker to the level of Ben Simmons, a facilitator to the level of Ben Simmons. And then you look on the defensive end, Ben Simmons is a superior defender to Jaylen Brown. He just is. I don't think you can't argue that. Ben Simmons is a far superior perimeter defender to Jaylen Brown. He also has the height to be able to switch 1 through 5. You know, if teams go small, you can put Ben Simmons, your guard, onto the 5, a small ball 5, and feel very comfortable about doing so. The only thing that you lose is the 3-point shooting, which is why I'm like, I'd need to get Steph Curry in that deal for me to be like, yo, the Celtics marginally won this trade, because you're not winning a trade where you're giving away Jaylen Brown. But if you're coming out marginally better, I genuinely believe I've come to the decision that I genuinely believe Ben Simmons plus Tatum is better for Boston than Brown and Tatum. I understand Ben Simmons' attitude issues. I get it. But as a player personnel, strictly basketball, those two fit better, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I would say that the Sixers could probably make the same case that Jaylen Brown and Joel Embiid complement each other better than Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid do,
Sure.
right? So like in a vacuum, I think the trade makes sense for sure. It's the non-basketball stuff with Simmons, right? Going into last season, I think if you had said, should the Celtics trade Jaylen Brown for Ben Simmons, Philadelphia, and most people would have said, why would the Sixers ever do that? Like Ben Simmons is one of the best defenders in the league, all NBA guy. Like he's an amazing player. JB, I think, has exceeded so many people's expectations of what his ceiling could be, that, right now we think that JB is the better player, but at their peak levels, Ben Simmons is a better player. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think if Ben Simmons is committed to a team and he's being a professional, and he's really committed to being part of this team and growing with this team, and we'll move past all of this refusing to play and off-court like distractions. He stops dating Kardashians. He stops dating Maya Jama from London, which had a lot of English people upset. And he really focuses on his basketball. Then, yeah, I genuinely believe that Boston get the better player in that deal. Ben Simmons, when fully locked in, is a better player than what Jaylen Brown is as currently constructed.
For sure. And I just think with JB, what you're betting on is his work ethic over Ben Simmons' work ethic. Because I think that is something that people have been knocking Ben Simmons since his time at LSU. He just doesn't really love basketball. And JB, although he's a well-rounded person, right? He clearly loves basketball and clearly works really hard at his game. He wouldn't be at this point in his career if he didn't have an insane work ethic, considering where he was coming out of Cal. Like, nobody ever thought Jaylen Brown would become this good, and he has. Right. So that speaks to how hard he works and how many hours he spends in the gym. So for me personally, that's what I would prefer to bet on, is that Jaylen Brown is going to figure it out because he works so hard. It's just like, does he have the skill level to be the guy that we need him to be? And that is the question mark, is can he make high level reads, which he has not shown the ability to? Can he even really make simple passes, which he hasn't really shown the ability to do? Like last night, I thought of you immediately as this play was happening, where it's like in the fourth quarter, Celtics are on a run. Robert Williams sprints out on a fast break, wide open, and Jaylen Brown decides to do a look away bounce pass in transition, throws it at Robert Williams' feet, and then Robert Williams dives and like gets concussed, hitting his head on the floor, picking up the loose ball. And I was just like, I'm going to talk about this on the pod with Adam tomorrow, because all Jaylen Brown had to do, he could have stared Robert Williams down for like 4 steps and nobody would have been able to get a hand on that ball. And instead, he does a ridiculous look-away pass and overcomplicates the pass. Because all I had to do was just chest pass right to Robert Williams. That's a dunk. And I think the Celtics would have taken the lead at that point, if my memory serves me correctly. Right? I'm kind of lost my train of thought. We were talking about Ben Simmons and Jaylen Brown. So, like, I don't want to do it. Right? I don't want to make that trade. I want to bet on Jaylen Brown's work ethic. I do have another trade that I would like to pitch to you that doesn't involve Jaylen Brown, if you're ready to move on, or if you
No, I've said my piece on why I want Simmons. Yeah.
So my fake trade is with the Portland Trailblazers. Okay. And I would give up both of our young wings, Aaron Nesmith and Romeo Langford. Don't know how you feel about that. Al Horford and 2 future firsts. Okay, we're gonna go this year, which might be a good pick, top 8 protected, and then 2024 top 5 protected. And in return, we get Yusuf Nurkic and CJ McCollum. Initial thoughts?
Okay, so you're not getting CJ this season because of his collapse lung. So you're banking on CJ coming back healthy next year. So that's the first thing that put me off a little bit. And
is he done for the year?
He might be back, but the dude's got a collapsed lung. I think he'd take as long as you need to make sure you're back in full strength before you come back. I've told myself that it's unlikely you'll see him this year, but there is a chance. And then you've got Nurkic as well, that's injury prone. He's been in and out the lineup for a few years now. I really like the idea of having Nurkic. I think Nurkic is a fantastic short roll initiator. Big body, solid on the boards. He's a good finisher in the block on the mid post. He can create a little bit for you out of the post as well, and he can do a lot above the free in terms of like dribble handoff creation, and he can fire some bullet passes over the top to you. So I like Nurkic as like a long-term solution to Al Horford, but you're losing that 3-point shooting, but that's okay because at the moment Al Horford's 3-point shooting has regressed anyway. And then CJ McCollum, that works in a vacuum because you're adding that extra scorer. But the same reason I caught, and I think that CJ McCollum can create a little bit as well, can create his own shot off the dribble a little bit. But I'm like, it's the same reason I kind of lean away from Bradley Beal at the same time. Like, we've had 3 scorers on this team before and it's never worked, right? We've had Kemba Walker with these guys, it didn't work. Kyrie with these guys, didn't work. Jordan Hayward with these guys, that was probably the closest you got to it working because Hayward was the connector. I like the idea though. I feel like you're getting rid of 2 guys that you're not going to give the big minutes to under Udoka, and you're getting back 2 guys that would get like legitimately impactful minutes. And I do think that you could see a good partnership develop between like Nurkic and Grant and Nurkic and Tatum. You could see things developing there. And to me, I know McCollum's probably the bigger name and the better player, but Nurkic is the guy that I think would have the bigger impact to begin with this team. So I wouldn't say no to that. To be fair, I think that giving up 2 picks for that is a little bit much just based on the contracts and the injury issues with both of those guys, like the injury concerns with both of them. I'd probably lean towards just 1 pick over 2. But again, Portland are going to be in a rebuild. They're going to want the draft assets to move on from those 2 guys. So I understand it completely.
Yeah, and maybe it's like one of Romeo or Neesmith if they want another pick, like we get to keep one of the young guys, just you want to hold on to one of your assets in that situation. Yeah, Nurkic is the guy that is interested in me. I don't know CJ McCollum's medical. I'm not pretending to be a doctor, but I do have one anecdotal story about a collapsed lung in which someone that I know returned from a collapsed lung really quickly. My buddy Matt Stone that I played basketball with back at Boston Latin School, he collapsed his lung early in one of the seasons that we were playing, and he came back in like a month. So like maybe from that one anecdote, like maybe it's possibly he comes back. I don't know though, but if CJ were to come back this year, I think that the lineup that you could put out there, especially with Nurkic, would be really interesting, man. Right? We would have Smart, McCollum, the Jays, still have J. Rich, Grant, Rob, and Nurkic. Like, I think that's a pretty solid 8-man rotation there. And I think in this scenario, you're probably going to be giving up on Dennis Schroeder. So if you're giving up, your draft assets to get those guys, I think you probably try to move Schroeder off for a first round pick is something I think we should do anyway. But in this scenario, I think we definitely do that. But Nurkic is one of those guys, man, like, his contract's up at the end of the season. And if we're worried about like, can we keep him long-term because our cap situation and whatnot, if Nurkic seems to be a better piece than the guys that you currently have, like Marcus Smart, Richardson, and or Robert Williams, like you can always move off of one of those contracts if you prefer to keep Nurkic, So like if I think that's something that a lot of people would push back on immediately is they would be like, no, but like our cap situation, like there's no way we're going to be able to sign him. It's like, yeah, but you have other contracts you can move off of. He really interests me, man, because he's still young. I think that in my opinion, he's far superior to Robert Williams and Al Horford at the center position. So like you're immediately upgrading that. He's not quite Sabonis, like he's not on that level, but I think he's kind of in the level between what Robert Williams and Al Horford are and what Sabonis is. This is a deal that I would definitely do. Like I would love to keep Neesmith. I would love to keep Romeo, but I just don't know what they're going to be. And right now we need to turn this ship around immediately, especially when you're questioning whether or not Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown can last long term. Like we need to make something happen in the next 2 years. And this trade makes us better this year. And I think it makes us better for the duration of the Jays contracts.
Yeah. I mean, I'm all in. I'm bringing Nurkic in. I know I'm a big fan of Nurkic. I call him Jokic light. You know what I mean? Because you get a little bit of everything Jokic does apart from the threes, but just not at the same level, I also think as well, like that opens you up to make some smaller moves around the margins then, because you start freeing, like you've picked a lane at that point. You're like, yo, we're going in. Like once you pick a lane, it becomes far easier to start making deals. Maybe you go for a reliable backup guard like a Corey Joseph that's not going to cost you a lot, but he's going to be able to move the ball quite consistently. You can go and pick him up for maybe like, I don't know, like maybe you could throw away. If Schroeder's still there, maybe you can do Schroeder plus a second rounder for Corey Joseph, who's just going to come in and be a playmaker for you. He's not really going to try and score too much. You can start, once you're in that zone, you can start making deals around because you've got that lane chosen. And I feel like this is the biggest issue right now. You don't know which way the Celtics want to go. Do they want to keep developing talent? It doesn't look like it because they're not developing the talent. But they're not all in yet. They're not really committing to this core. And if they are, then they need to start making moves. And Nurkic would be a good start, especially if it came with CJ McCollum in tow. I'd be all in then. I think that team then really makes a good push in the East. It's a far more well-rounded starting five, but the bench still needs work. But it's definitely a good start. So I'm in on that deal.
Yeah, for sure. And it's interesting. You talk about we're not developing our young guys, which I agree with. And so does that mean we just view them as assets, or is it that we're trying to play up the value of a Josh Richardson and play up the value of a Dennis Schroeder by giving them the minutes early in the season so that we can boost their trade value and trade them? And then we know on the back end that we like what Romeo brings. We like what Aaron Nesmith brings. Right now is just not the time for you because we need to get the trade value up of those vets with the contracts. So I don't know. I don't know either way, but this is a trade I pitched to Will and he hated it. He did not want to make it happen. I think I actually had more draft picks in it, so I reduced the amount of draft picks because he was like, when I initially said it to him, I think I had like a pick swap in there as well, and he was like, "Oh, I thought you were going to say for Dame Lillard." I was like, "No, man, it's just CJ and Nurkic." But I think this trade definitely makes the Celtics better, and that's what I want right now, man. Like we need to make these small moves that just make us a better team. Right now, we're not a good team. We're 16 and 19. That's horrible at this point of the year. So, like, I'm down to shake it up on some level. I'm not ready to trade Jaylen Brown though.
See, I'm there. I'm kind of there. I'm not saying it's the only way to improve the team. And if you can find a way like you just did, where you can improve the team while keeping Brown and Tatum, I'm all for it. But you need to find a way to start taking the ball out of these guys' hands a little bit more and allowing them to get to their spots off ball and then feeding them the rock. I just feel like they're being asked to do, like Jason Tatum's being asked to be the primary scorer and the primary initiator. And like, that's too much, man. Like, in my opinion, when you're a wing, you need to be really allowed to score. Like, you're asking him to be a player that he's not. You're asking, and we can see right now that Jaylen Brown is having to be somebody that he clearly isn't cut out to be. That's not his game. Nothing wrong with that, bro. Nothing. You have point forwards, and point forwards usually aren't as potent offensively, but they're more designed to be a connector. Gordon Hayward was perfect. He's probably the player that they're missing the most right now. If you could plug Gordon Hayward into this team, I feel far more comfortable because there's a guy that can handle the rock, create the offense, but doesn't need to be the guy finishing every play. Right, I feel like Tatum and Brown need to be your play finishers, not your play initiators, and this is where the difference is. But if you can find ways to bring in somebody that's going to initiate for you without losing these two guys, great. But if you want someone of a high level, like somebody that's going to come in and be the best playmaker Tatum's ever played with in his career, unfortunately, that's going to cost you a guy that is already at a high level too. And the only guy you've got like that who's not named Tatum is Jaylen Brown. And it sucks, but that's just the reality of it's called a trade for a reason. It's not called a robbery. It's called a trade. So you know what I mean? It has to be even, or at least perceived as even. I think that wraps us up. Anything else you want to hit on?
No, man. Just like everyone tune in and watch my boy Steve Moy on Married at First Sight because you're gonna fall in love with him. He's my cousin, my older cousin. So my mom's brother. He's his son. So my uncle Jim, it's his son Stevie. Stevie is also a musician, like great DJ, former rapper. Was like my mentor coming up in the music scene. So like tune in and watch my boy Steve because he's a good dude, man. He's a good dude.
I'll tell you what, man, when we get that over here, because my wife watches that show. So when my wife's watching that, I want to be like, yo, let me watch that first episode when this Steve goes there. I want to see my boy run this pick and roll. He was telling me it looked great. Let me see what it's about. So I want to be looking at what's going on around him. I just want to see what Greg's doing in this pick and roll with the lob to the layup. That's what I'm looking for. Right, everybody, if you've enjoyed the show, you know what to do by now. Head over to your Apple store, scroll down, find that 5 stars, hit it, write something nice about us, make us smile. If you're not using an Apple device, I'm not sure whether Greg's really feeling it right now, but he's going to tell you anyway what you need to do.
You need to tell everybody in your life to subscribe or follow the CelticsPod, Celtics Blog podcast for SB Nation. Make sure you're checking out all the content that's posted on Celtics Blog, all the stuff that my guy Adam Taylor is posting on Celtics Blog. Tell your dog walker, tell your barber, tell the person that is testing you for COVID, tell the person that's giving you your vaccine for COVID. Just tell them about the Celtics Pod on the Celtics Blog podcast, because we bring it every single day for you. Well, when we do the pods, and we really appreciate you. It's the end of the year. We've come a long way. We got here to this point. I'm super happy that Adam has allowed me to be on this pod. I'm super happy that everyone has given such great feedback and have accepted me into the Celtics Blog community. So shout out to everybody, and make sure you're telling everybody to listen to the pod.
And with that, we'll leave everybody to carry on with their Friday. Happy New Year, everybody. We'll speak to you again in January 2022. Deuces.
Peace.